Okay, we seem to be live. Great. So welcome everyone to this Mobile Site Clinic Hangout. I'm Syed Malik.
And this is Nitesh.
Yeah, so we both work for the Google Search Quality team, and we're really excited to be doing this site clinic, especially focused on mobile, because we know why mobile is important, and a lot of people have been asking questions. And we have also recently launched a few resources to help you with your mobile website development and things like that. So we're here to discuss all of those things, plus what we found from the analysis of your sites.
So first and foremost, thank you so much for participating in the site clinic and giving us your website so that we can do some analysis and then see and get some data out of it. It's been very good response, and thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I think we'll start the present. So we have made a presentation basically. So Nitesh will run you through the presentation.
Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see.
Can see?
Okay, all of you can see the presentation, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure if people who are watching this Hangout are able to view. Okay, I think everyone is able to see.
Yeah.
Right? That's great.
Okay, so let's start off. Some basic stats from what we received from the websites that we received from you and what we could understand. We kind of went through in detail and we created an analysis over different fields, probably about 20 plus fields as to what is required for a mobile site. And these are some things that came out, some things that went good, some things that were not too good. Close to 96% of the websites prioritized their visible content really well. They knew what was the important content to be displayed, and about 98% of them were very clear with that, no use of plugins, because plugins tend to slow pages loading on browsers, especially on mobile. Having said that, some things which we could work on to improve the whole user experience, along with faster load times on mobile devices. 87% of websites did not use browser caching as one of the ways to reduce the time required to load pages. Along with that, 84% of the website did not have their tap targets appropriately sized. This means that it's pretty difficult to click through the pages on these particular sites, and it leads to a fairly bad user experience. So we'll go through some of these in the coming slides, and we'll add some more to that, and then we'll kind of see what we'll focus on what are the most important points that we need to rectify so that we can have much better user experience for our users. We'll talk about the best practices for optimal websites, mobile optimized, that is. One of the first things that we can talk about is in terms of speed. The first thing is browser caching. Why caching some of your data of your web pages is very important on multiple sites on user browsers. Optimizing images, providing the right size image and the right definition of the image is very important. Using asynchronous JavaScript so that we do not slow down the first render of the pages to our users. There are also other resources like minifying resources. These will ensure that the data transfer stays at the minimum so that we can have much faster load times. Enabling compression, improving server response time, and also avoiding unnecessary landing page redirects.
So I think there are a lot of things we're discussing speed. We're going to talk about speed because when you're talking about mobile, I think it is very important to consider how speedy your web pages are, because a recent survey that was done, we found that on an average, a web page on mobile devices, it takes about 7 seconds to load, right? However, the survey also told us that what people expect is they want these pages to load within 1 second. And that is the point of distraction, meaning if the page is not loading within a second, then people start to get distracted, right? So they may actually go on to another web page or open another app or do something else, right? That is the tendency. So this is what we found. So I think speed is a very, very important thing, especially when it comes to mobile. So you're seeing a number of things that we are going to discuss here about speed. And then we have some more things from user experience.
Yeah, so well, in short, good user experience keep users engaged with your site, as Syed said, and that is what we'll be focusing on today as well. Also, one more very important point is the actual user experience, or how difficult is it for the user to navigate through your pages, or how easy it is. One of the few very important factors that we'll talk about is defining a viewport and sizing your content to the viewport. Along with that, defining proper tab targets to ensure that your users do not click on the wrong targets or wrong links by mistake, as well as using legible fonts. So we'll be focusing on viewport definition and proper tab targets today, and legible fonts is most of the sites did use this pretty well, so we will not go into detail of that, but the data is always available on our help centers. Well, moving on to misconfigurations and what could go wrong to give your users a pretty bad experience. There are many things that can go wrong, but some of the most important ones that we can talk about is unsupported formats, blocked content, not allowing the Google bot to crawl the right content, or blocking some particular files like CSS files, faulty redirects. We'll go into detail of this, but we'll probably start off with leveraging browser caching.
Yeah, I think before that, we can probably summarize how this session is going to look like. So basically, we are, if you see, we're going to focus on two areas. That one is speed, and the other is the user experience. Basically, when a user is opening your website on a mobile device, how long it is taking for that person to see the web page. This involves your network traffic, basically data traveling from the server to the mobile device, and also the rendering part, how fast it is being rendered on the mobile device, right? So these are the things we will cover. And going on to user experience, there are a few things that we will also cover. Once the page is loaded on the device, how is the user experience? Is the user able to achieve what he or she is there for, right? So these are two important things that we're going to discuss. And by the way, the things that there are a lot of things, of course, in these two areas that we can actually talk about, right? However, what we're going to discuss in this session are the things that we have found can be improved in the sites that have been submitted as part of the site clinic, right? So these are some of the very prominent and common problems across the websites that you have submitted. So I think a lot of these things you will realize that can be fixed on your own websites, right? So we have designed this session to discuss those things and not to go into the things that are like already doing pretty good or are not major problems with your websites. Okay, so I think we'll start with the first thing we want to discuss under the speed.
Yes. So there's just a bit of lag between the presentation as well as on YouTube, so we'll just hold a little so that we can get on par with that.
Okay. So we'll go a little bit slow.
Yes.
Okay.
So the first topic that we'll discuss today is leveraging browser caching. Well, cache is basically a set of files that you can store on a browser related to your web page or a website. So there are many things that when a user loads or opens your website or multiple pages of your site, you might need to query multiple points, multiple files from your server. And you might want to cache this on the browser of the user rather than querying it every time. This will ensure that you save a lot of time and data resources for the user as well. One of the suggestions that we provide is including a cache control in the header of every page. Using cache control, you can ensure that you decide what are the files that need to be cached, what are the length of the file, the maximum age of the file, and so on. You could also specify the the length for which you want to cache it. Like say, for example, something like the logo of your site, which usually does not change regularly, you could probably cache it for a year or so. Or something that is more dynamic, which could change every week or a monthly basis, you could cache it for a minimum of about a week. We usually recommend that we cache it. But if you use cache, you have a minimum age of about a week and a maximum of a year. Having said that, you can go a little lower, but if there's something that you think changes very regularly, then you might as well query it on the fly.
Any questions here?
Actually, I have. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
The question is that there are some plugins that we use in WordPress that are helping us in browser caching.
Okay.
But sometimes that those pages using browser caching are on other browsers.
I'm really sorry. Your voice is very flaky, so we are not able to get the question.
Okay. I don't know. Perhaps it's some technical issue. I'm just posting it in chat.
We still can't hear you clearly.
Okay, not a problem. I'm going to post this question in chat.
Right. So I think we'll go through the slides now and then take a look at your question sometime later. Yes. So yeah. So okay.
Let's finish with it, and we can come back to the question by then. So we have a checklist that you could follow to ensure that you're following all the right practices for browser caching. First is use consistent URLs. If you're using, say, if you're caching a particular image, you might want to use the same URL across all your pages for this particular image. This will ensure that you cache it just once and not have duplicate caches of the same file. Ensure that the server provides ETag. Now, what is ETag? ETag is basically a hash of the file that you have cached. This will so every time the server reacts or talks to the browser, it is sending an ETag file, which will ensure that you are actually using the right cache. And if there is any change in the cache, the ETag will tell the browser to update the cache. So you need not tell a browser what is the caching or the hashing mechanism you're using, as long as the hash remains the same. Next is, it's very important to determine the optimal cache lifetime. As we discussed, logo could stay for a year, and something else with that is more dynamic, probably a week. So it is very critical that you determine the right cache lifetime. This becomes even more critical when you do not use ETag. The life of the cache, say, if you change the file and the life of the cache is a year, then it may not reflect the same on the browser or for the user. So this is very important. The last point that's also very important is minimize data transfer, especially with mobile and 3G connections. You might want to use the least data transfer to render the page. What you could do is, with all the files that you're caching, it makes more sense to split these into smaller files and cache them. This will ensure that any changes in your file, you will only be needing to update that particular file in the cache rather than the whole cache itself. Is that any questions here?
Yeah. Can I ask a question here?
Yes, sure.
Using a framework called Foundation, I probably think that it is a very famous, and we have that framework. Means that suppose if I have to load an image for a different image for desktop, and suppose if there is an image for there's a different image for mobile, but the image is same. Want to load a huge image for a desktop mobile device, right? So is it okay? Can we use kind of interchange class, but the URLs will be changing for the images?
Okay, if I get your question right, you're basically asking, can you use two different images to serve on a desktop device and a mobile device, right?
But the website will be responsive like a separate URL. It will be, but as we use interchange class, I can serve for a mobile image, I think for a mobile users, and a huge image for a desktop users.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that is the recommended practice, right? Especially talking about mobile, you want to minimize your data transfer, so you would definitely do not want to serve an image which is like created for large desktop screens, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
ultimately it will be scaled down on a mobile device, so
Mhm.
there is no use, right, of the extra data that you're sending. So I think we will cover some of this also in the images part that we're going to discuss, right?
Yes.
But yes, you're absolutely right. You can use two different images, and that is in fact, as I said, recommended practice.
Will not be the URL will change for the images.
That is still acceptable
Okay.
as long as it's the same image, which with a different.
So I have another question. So suppose if a Google bot crawls the image, what exactly will it see? Will it see a static image or will it see a mobile image?
It totally depends on the viewport and the configuration of your page. If you clearly define that this particular part of it is for mobile and this particular part is for desktop, then we see both versions of that.
Because we have a different bot for a mobile and different mobile.
Absolutely. So I think when you're serving the desktop page, we will see the desktop image. And
Okay,
when Googlebot Mobile comes to your website and you serve the mobile web page, we will see the mobile optimized image.
okay. Thanks very much. I think
No, no problem, no
no
problem.
problem.
And I think we will discuss more on how to select what type of images you want to use, whether to go for vector or for the raster images and things like that in the images section.
Okay, thanks. Bro.
Right.
Moving on, well, it's the images section. So we'll talk about what is the right format and how important is an image into in loading of a page, loading of a site, and so on. I'm just waiting for the sync between the stream as well as the presentation. I don't know why it's happening, but yeah, it should be fine.
Yeah, so basically people who are watching us and have not joined in the Hangout, probably there is some lag, it seems. So we will go a little bit slow.
Okay, so coming to choosing the right image format. Well, this is a tricky case, and we see that most of the images are unnecessarily very big sized or high definition when it is not necessary.
And I think even before that, a lot of times, actually, you can maybe choose not to use an image in the first
Mhm.
place, right? So probably a lot of things, a lot of times, probably you can just have text,
Text, yeah.
right? Or you can just use CSS and HTML5 to to come up with the graphics that you want, right? So whenever you have to use an image, just step back and think about, okay, do I really need a raster image, or can I use a vector graphic in this place, or can I make use of HTML5 and CSS, and does it serve my purpose, right? So basically, one criteria to decide between these two things, whether you use a vector graphic or a raster one, is, say, for example, if you have too many details in an image, right, then you may want to prefer a raster image, because then SVG file would get very bulky and that wouldn't serve the purpose that we are trying to fix, right? But if you have like simple plain images that are geometric shapes, etc., then you may prefer to go with either the HTML and CSS combination or the SVG, right? However, when you have to like go with a raster image, right, with not an SVG or a vector graphic, then I think there are certain things that you can actually think about to select the best possible outcome for your images.
I think one more advantage of, say, using CSS and HTML5 where required, and if you can avoid an image, is the fact that, especially if you're using text, like say banner or something like that, this will ensure that this is being crawled and searchable and improve your, the result of your page and look and the feel of your page. This will also ensure that the Google bot knows what it is crawling, and it could improve the overall effectiveness of your page.
Absolutely, I think that's a very important point that Nitish has brought up. So a lot of times you've also seen that people use text within images even for navigation, right? I mean, this was a heavy practice back in the day, but even today we see with a lot of websites which are not run by savvy webmasters, they still use these kind of images. So I think it is important to really stop and think, like, do I really need a raster image for this, or do I have better options? And I think there are much better options instead of images.
Okay, so so assuming that you need an image itself, right? So there are multiple options that you could choose. The first question to ask is, do you need animation in these images? If yes, then GIF is one of the most used formats. One of the biggest issues with GIF is that there are losses in the display of it. It supports at most 256 colors, and most of the times it ends up with it's not too good for a choice for good images. So you could probably also consider using HTML5 and CSS3 to give you more or less the same effect, and still use plain images. Say if there are no animations involved, then the next question to answer is, do you want to preserve the fine detail with the highest resolution, or it is not very important? Like, provided you say you want to preserve it, and then you got to choose between how much do you want to preserve versus how many colors do you want to use and what is the definition. If it is not too detailed, then you could probably use a PNG file format with an 8-bit data, or say if you're using something like a picture of the clouds where you want to show the different colors and all of that, you probably would use PNG24. But please do note that this increases the file size by a very big margin, and this tends to slow the load time of these pages, and you'll just be holding on to your user for some time before your images load, which may not be a great experience.
And by the way, one tidbit to insert here is like one of the surveys told us that over 65% of the data that is transferred to mobile devices is actually images. So absolutely. So I think optimizing images, you can achieve, I mean, a lot, right? And basically, if you optimize your images, then you are capturing that 65% of the optimization bit, right? So I think images are really important to optimize. And if you really choose your images wisely, then more than half of your job of optimizing your sites for mobile is, like, when it comes to speed and things like that, is done.
I think many times very simple images like the logo or probably thumbnails, which need not have very high definition, can be scaled down by a very big margin and still maintain the same quality. Like, say, when you choose to use JPEG, we recommend that you experiment with various quality settings, try it out on different display devices, and then see if it still gives you the same quality, like a full HD on one device, as well as something that's scaled down on another device, and see if you can actually identify the differences and if it actually makes sense for you to be using a very large sized image. Any questions here? Okay, I think we can go down to the checklist. So we've already spoken about every one of these. Prefer vector format where possible. Pick the best image format. Experiment with the best image settings. Many times the size of the image really does not matter. Remove unnecessary metadata. I think this is something that many amateur webmasters do miss out on, is including of metadata like geo, timestamp, and so on these images, which unnecessarily increases the file size, which you could probably let go of.
And this actually also applies to your vector graphics, So for example, if you're using SVG format, then that is basically an XML file. And within an XML file, you can have bulk of data which can be unnecessary. Like, you may have comments, you may have unnecessary namespaces there and things like that, right? Which you can actually remove and minify these files to a great extent, really great extent, right? So this applies to both, whether you're using vector graphics or raster ones.
Always serve scaled images. Serve the image that is required for that particular user agent. There is no point in serving a desktop sized image to a mobile user, because it just gets scaled down, and you still do not have any advantages there. And the last point is automate, automate, automate. Try your best to ensure that you have automation systems for all of these, that images are scaled on the fly automatically, and you do not have to manually keep doing this very regularly.
Absolutely. So for raster images, you would have to have, like as we were discussing, like it is best practice for you to have multiple versions of your images and serve those images based on the device type and size of the screen, right? And talking about automation, all the best practices we have discussed, including resizing your images for different devices, minifying your images, and in fact, you can also like gzip them when you're serving them, right? So all these things actually should be automated, because if you're trying to do this manually, then I think you're going to spend a lot of time, all the time yourself, trying to do new images. So I think automation is one of the very important points here.
The next thing that we're going to talk about is removing render blocking JavaScripts. I think this is one of the most important factor, and close to 98% of our users or of the websites that were submitted in the Site Clinic did not cater to this. So we'll go a little detail into this now. So whenever you're using JavaScripts, what happens is it blocks the creation of the DOM files in a browser, and the browser is actually waiting for the JavaScript to be receive the JavaScript, execute it, and then render the page. So we have a couple of suggestions here to improve this, and this can actually improve the speed by a pretty big margin. The first is use inline JavaScripts when you have to use a JavaScript and it's very critical. So you could probably split this JavaScript that you're using into critical and non-critical. Whatever is critical, the best recommendation that we have is use it inline. Doing this will save you the time of pinging the server and receiving the data back, and this can save about 30-40% of the load time for these particular scripts. And next, what you could do is you could also use async JavaScript. So this will ensure that these JavaScripts do not wait, or the browser does not wait for these JavaScripts to load, and it still continues to do it. How async works is that it pings the server for the JavaScript and then continues with the next step, and the first render of the page is ready as soon as possible. And as and when these JavaScripts do execute, the web page is updated on the fly. Any questions with the JavaScripts or using asynchronous JavaScripts?
I have a question here.
Sure.
Can we use the same policy for the codes that we integrate, like Google Analytics tracking code or the conversion tracking code? Can we use the same practice for those codes?
So yes, you can use it in the async version. So that will ensure that we do not wait for your page to load.
Okay, thank you so much.
Moving on, we'll probably move a little towards the UI part of it and look at what are the responsive designs that you can use to give users a great experience. The first thing under this is, as we discussed, defining a viewport and sizing your content to this viewport in an efficient manner. Okay. A viewport is basically defined as a viewport basically controls how a web page is displayed on a mobile device. If you do not declare a viewport, the mobile devices will render the page at a typical desktop screen width and then scale it down to fit the screen size. And this gives you an impression that the font is too small on the device, the links are too small, and the user is forced to zoom into these particular to read this particular text. And also it's also very critical to ensure that your users do not scroll horizontally. because that is a pretty bad user experience. So by defining a viewport, you can convert that scroll into a vertical scroll and ensure that the users can read it better. So how do you do this? Well, you could include a meta tag in your header and say meta name viewport, and you could also declare the width of the device, or you. So we would add, or you could declare the width of the image that you're, or the object that you're showing. We would advise you to use width equal to device width, and this is basically a dynamic system wherein the browser will understand the width of the device and automatically adjust the page for that. Having said that, you could also mention the particular pixel size and use it, but it is not a great user experience that way. So one of the best examples here is, say you've declared a particular size width, and the user changes from a landscape to a horizontal way. And so what this does is it does not give him the same user experience on that, and using an initial scale 1 would ensure that it kind of fits in automatically.
Absolutely. So I think even when you're using device width equals device width, which means the width should be set dynamically according to the screen size, right? Even then, if you do not have the initial scale equals to 1 parameter there, then some mobile devices, including iOS, like iPhone, right? What they'll do is, when the user goes from a portrait mode to a landscape mode, they will still retain the original width of the screen, right? So they will still show the text within with the the portrait width in the landscape mode as well, right? So it is important for you to give include this parameter as well, initial scale 1. And as Nitesh mentioned, coming to the width thing, it is absolutely not recommended to give fixed width unless you know that you have specific users who are going to use only specific devices. If you're sure about those, then you can set the width. Otherwise, again, it is just like not setting a viewport, or a pretty bad experience, because when you have fixed the width, and if a user is using a device which is not the same width, then of course it is not going to render properly.
So this is an example that we have of using a fixed width, wherein it is set to 344 pixel and it is designed for the second image here, but then you can see that it doesn't fit very well on the first device. So this is one of the best examples that we can have to say how important it is to set the right viewport. You could also specify the minimum width and the maximum width using the CSS at media queries. So this will ensure that if you want to show a minimum size of your image, then you can specify that, and also the maximum. This could be useful in a variety of cases, especially when you're the gallery page of your site or something like that, where you want to show the minimum size of the image and not scale it down too little as well. Let's just hold for a minute so that we sync with the streaming that we have. It's a little off.
So maybe I think our voice is also being synced. So
we
can just go like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next is the proper tap targets. Well, tap targets are basically links or navigational links which you could it's basically the difference between clicking on a link as well and tapping on a smartphone. It's a lot different with the way it behaves. Like, say for example, a link would typically be of height about 2 to 3 mm and not more than that, whereas your finger alone is 10 millimeters in width. So it may be pretty difficult for you to click on those. So it's very critical to declare the right tap targets to ensure that you have the right kind of links that or user experience that you can provide your users. Small or tightly packed links or buttons are very difficult to use on a touchscreen. You will see yourself zooming into these particular links or these particular parts of your web page in order to tap on them, and that may not be a very good user experience. So an average adult finger pad, as I say, the index finger is about 10 millimeter in width and the thumb is a lot more. So uh, keeping this in mind, we have a few recommendations into what should be the size of these images, what should be the size of these links or navigational we usually recommend about 7 mm as the width or the height of important tap targets. This this comes up to about 48 CSS pixel. And if you think that these tap targets are not very important for everyday use, or these are not navigational as such, we could reduce it to about 5 between tap targets. But I think anything below this will force you to, the user could click on or tap on the wrong target, which could lead to a bad user experience. So it just leads to bounce, and he comes back and then he clicks on the right one. So that may not be a great user experience here. That's it with the UI part. We'll talk a little bit about the user experience here, and what small mistakes or big mistakes on small devices that can actually have a very bad user experience for the user. The first is unsupported formats. I think this is one of the most widely spoken issues with mobile devices. I mean, how many times have you seen this happen to you, where you open a page and then all it says is that this page is not supported here? Well, Flash is one of the best examples that you can use here. Flash does not load on mobile devices, so we advise you to avoid using Flash as much as possible. There are alternatives like HTML5 that you could use to provide the same user experience. So it's always a very good practice to test the videos on your phone for compatible softwares and ensure that it works as you intended to.
Also, I think if at all your website uses any plugins like JavaScript, Java applets, or Java plugins, or whatever, it is best to avoid using those. And instead, I think now the HTML5 and CSS can suffice. So I think it is best to use just those to give the seamless experience across devices.
Also, it's very important to add summaries or transcripts of videos below them. This will ensure that it helps us in crawling as well, and ensure the users, even if they're not able to see it, they at least know what is in store for them. The next thing that we'll talk about is faulty redirects. This is a very critical issue that we usually face. Like, say for example, you have a desktop page and you have and you do not have an equivalent mobile page, but your whole website is designed to redirect to M.dot version of that page for any mobile user agent. So what we suggest many times, what happens is when a user opens a desktop page on their mobile, it redirects to the M.dot version, but then the M.dot version does not exist, right? It's just a 404 page. So in these cases, we suggest that it's okay to serve the desktop version rather than showing a 404 M.dot version, because something is better than nothing. But then preferably you would be wanting to redirect to the right page here. So again, another very important thing to look at while redirecting is that you do not redirect all the pages of your site to the home page of your mobile device. This leads to a very bad user experience. The user is disoriented. He'll need to probably relook into where the user was, and then navigate back to that page, which is usually a pretty bad experience. And this is such a critical issue for us that we also mark it in Webmaster Tools. You can see the number of URLs of yours that has a faulty redirect on Webmaster Tools. This gets updated every time we crawl these pages, and this can be seen in the URL errors part of your Webmaster Tools. Coming to the end, always check your page with PageSpeed Insights. PageSpeed Insights is this tool that Google launched recently that provides you a lot of details as to how to fix, how to improve the speed and the user experience of your site. It gives you multiple resources as well, like say in this particular image, if you're talking about eliminate render blocking JavaScript, clicking on show how to fix actually shows you the particular JavaScript and the potential impact they can have on your load time, or if you can fix this. So this is a very strong tool that I would recommend you to use. It's available under developers.google.com, or you could use the QR code here to use that. Coming to the end, we have a lot of resources for you. Developers.google.com/webmasters. You can get most of these resources. Use a PageSpeed Insights tool, and you can get a lot of this. I think one important point here is there is also an API access to this particular tool, so you can plug it into your site and monitor your site on a real-time basis as to how well you're doing. Any update, you can monitor it in real time. And if you've not yet joined our community, I think the first thing you've got to do is join our community. It's available at d.co/inwebmasters. We share a lot. We discuss and share a lot of new updates and issues of other webmasters as well. So it's a very interactive community that you can join.
And I think we also keep posting activities that we do here in India for Indian webmasters, like this Hangout, right? So if you want announcements and things like that, you should definitely join this community.
Okay, I think we should be ready to take some questions from. If anybody has any questions.
I have one question that I was asking last time regarding browser caching.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, there are some plugins that we use on WordPress websites for browsing caching. But the problem that we face with those plugins, when we make any change on the website, it is not directly visible on other side. One user is browsing my website and it is using a browser cache plugin, but if I made any change in my website, then it is not being visible at their side until they clear their cache. So how to fix this?
We are still not able to hear you very clearly. Would you mind entering your question in the group chat so that we can take that up?
Okay, fine, not a problem.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have questions from others?
Tausif, I think your question is if you can download the presentation, if I'm not wrong.
Yes,
well,
yes.
if it is that, there is no way to download the presentation. But having said that, this video will go live on our community and on YouTube, so you could cross-reference it at any point in time.
Also, I think the resources that we have shared with you, almost all of this content has been taken from there. Right, so you already have this plus much more. So you definitely want to go and check those resources out actually.
Okay.
Any other questions from anybody?
Hello.
Yes.
Actually, we have recently done, right, and we are using a separate CSS file for mobile, right, and for desktop we have a different CSS. And what happens actually when a user browses from a mobile, the user agent detects being requested from a mobile device, right? It shows appropriate file for mobile users. It shows to mobile JS file and CSS file, and for shows appropriately for desktop users. So, will we violate any kind of Google guidelines in this?
So I think your question is basically you're serving different JavaScript and CSS files for desktop and mobile devices, right?
That's right, yeah.
Right, and is this a violation of quality guidelines?
That's right, yeah.
Right. So basically, if you see mobile websites can be created in three ways, right?
Yeah.
One is the responsive web design,
Yep.
which is recommended by Google as well, right?
Yep.
There are a lot of advantages over disadvantages using responsive web design. The other way is to use the dynamic serving, right? And the third way would be to use an entirely separate site like m.yourdomain.com, right? So I'm guessing when you're saying you're serving different content, I mean different JavaScript files in CSS, you're probably using dynamic serving. Are you?
Uh, no, we are not using dynamic serving. The developer knows, and this is the question he came. This is the asked him that why we are using a
Okay.
different JS file and CSS.
Okay. Right. So you're basically not sure what you're using.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
right. If you're using responsive web design, then I see no need for you to serve different files altogether, right? Because responsive web design is meant for that. You serve the same content as you serve to the desktop devices to your mobile users as well. And based on the screen size and things like that, how you will have to configure that within the scripts, and it will render appropriately, right? So this problem won't arise there. However, if
Yeah.
you're using dynamic serving, you would have to serve different content. This is where this is absolutely, I mean, this is kind of required, right? So this is absolutely not against our guidelines.
Uh,
Um,
just had a chat with the developer, and we are using that.
Sorry?
We are using that.
Absolutely. So if you're doing that, you will have to be using dynamic serving. Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is basically required. So this is no way against our quality guidelines.
Okay, thanks
I
very much.
think as long as you're transparent and you declare all of this to the Google bot, then you must be good. As long as you do not cloak these changes to the Google bot, then it should be fair enough.
Okay, thanks very much.
And I hope, just to insert one other point, and I hope you're using the HTTP vary header. Your developer will know this, and I'm
Yeah,
guessing he or she, whoever it is.
yeah.
Yeah, so that is an important point for Google to know that you're using dynamic serving.
Okay, okay.
Right.
Thanks very much.
You're most welcome.
Let's get back to Shankar's question. Sorry to keep you waiting, Shankar. He says that we are using some browser cache plugins for WordPress-based websites, but any changes made on them are not visible to users at the user's end until they clear their browser cache. I think I'm not very sure what the problem here
So I
could
think
be.
I have seen this problem with WordPress caching as well. So sometimes this is also WordPress itself that does, and this problem could be actually until we see the case, we won't be able to actually detect what exactly the problem may be. It could be from their service providers, it could be their computer itself, or it could be how you are actually controlling the cache. Shankar, you with us?
Yeah, I got your point. But the problem is, we are regularly checking that the WordPress version that we are using is updated, and the plugins that we are using are from trusted sources. Means at our end, we are making everything sure that everything stays in place according to the best practices.
Right.
But
You may want to go back and check what kind of headers you are sending for your WordPress pages, right?
yeah,
And what kind of cache control and things like that are in place.
So it could be an issue with the maximum age of the cache that you're sending, and you may not be sending an e tag with that to reset that when required. I think this could be something that you might want to have a relook into.
yeah, that is something that I think I need to check at my end.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No questions?
I guess we'll have some more questions once we go through the details given by you guys. And
I'm sure you will. Yes.
So we always have a community, and we encourage you to discuss these in your community. And I'm sure one of the other members of the community will help you out, or one of us from the team here can definitely help you.
yeah, definitely, we are getting constant help from the community.
That's great. Good to hear that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and actually we are also looking forward to more mobile questions in our next hangout, right?
Yeah.
The Master Officer Hangout that we do every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we would really expect all of you to like basically go through the resources that we have shared.
Yeah.
And yes, we will expect more questions in a
Yeah. In fact, me and my team is the most notorious in asking questions in this community.
I wouldn't call you notorious. I
Okay.
think it is really good that you're engaging and asking questions. That is what we are here for,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, we feel really good.
The problem,
Proud to be serving you.
the benefit is we are getting instant resolution of all our issues. That's why we prefer to ask everything if it is related to the Google guidelines or regarding technical aspects. So that is the reason we are preferring it. It gives us a way to communicate directly with you guys, and that is a major advantage for us.
That is our intention as well, and thank you for pointing that out. Our goal is to ensure that we can make as much as we can be reachable to the Indian webmasters and kind of ensure that we build this one very active community that can sort out individuals' questions and so on.
Yeah, we are really indebted to Google India.
Thank you.
So any other last minute questions for anyone? I think we have 4 minutes to go before we close the hangout. Okay, so if there are no questions,
I think we can close it.
yep.
Okay. On behalf of everyone here at Search Quality in Hyderabad, thank you so much for actively participating in the site clinic and joining us today for the hangout. I think we just have one last question, so yeah, we'll just take that. Vinay says that hiding content in mobile, is this a good practice?
Why do you want to hide the content is the question. Right? So I think hiding is of different types. One, you may hide the content but make it available under certain navigation areas or under some certain clicks and taps, which is absolutely okay, right? However, if you're hiding content for different reasons, then that may not be okay, right? So always go back and see why you are trying to hide the content. If it is just for the usability, from a usability perspective, from a mobile device, then it is completely okay. But that content should be made available to the user, and basically when I say available, it should be accessible on the mobile device itself. So it can be under some menus or under some tabs or whatever, right? So if you're doing that, it is completely okay.
Does this answer your question, Vinay?
Okay, but
Great.
recently John Muller said that it doesn't index the content. Suppose if it is in the tab or read more section. So will Google mobile bot will index the content for the same?
Okay, I'm not really sure for what he said this, but it is not that we will not index any content that is hidden, because as you may have seen, I mean it is a common practice across websites, even on desktop, that you have hidden content right under menus and under certain areas of the website. So we definitely index that part of the content. So I think I'll have to go back and check what exactly was meant by John Miller.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I think we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining, and hoping to have more events like this on the community in the coming months.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.